get straight into the questions. Every one of them arising from Bob Dylan's Malibu, your fascinating book. In chapter two is all about a Renaissance pleasure fair. Now, do these things still go on today?
Yes, they do. They're not in the same location. The original Paramount Ranch, where we experienced it, was sold, and they've moved it to several different locations. It's still very popular, but it definitely does not have the same magic that it did in that beautiful canyon with those ancient oaks and just the feel of the old Indian spirits that once resided there.
Right. But what they do today is still popular and lots of people turn up.
Yes, pageantry, costume, the traditions, the food, the music, it's all still there, but different regional parks, they do their best to get the best natural setting that they can find.
Yeah. Okay. In chapter 5, which is called Yoga on a Rope, do you know if Stephanie Buffington still practices yoga? I asked that question because I would guess that she'll be in her 70s now.
Right. I believe she does. We've had some contact with her, and we're hoping to get together with her. I believe, you know, the practice of yoga is a lifelong commitment, I think. And she does at least she was doing the tours to India and Africa and places, and taking people to these exotic places. So when we get together with her, we'll find all that out.
She probably doesn't still do it on a rope.
Who knows?
Yeah. It's just like everything, it gets tougher to do the older you get.
She's an unusual person.
Yeah. Well, I do yoga, not absolutely consistently, I have to say, but my yoga teacher, she's in her 80s.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and impressive when she
Right.
does the
Get a rope.
exercises. No, she doesn't go on a rope, but we actually do use ropes, or what are akin to ropes, for some of the exercises.
Yeah.
In chapter 7, you talk about an ancient amulet. Do you still have that?
I do. I just can't find it. I have so many objects that have been wrapped carefully and put in boxes, and then that box put in another box, and that in another box, and put in the storage or in a closet. So I have to do a very deep dive to find it. Nancy's on me to find it. I do have it. I know I have it somewhere.
It'll probably turn up one day, but when you or Nancy are not specifically looking for it.
It's everything in my home is kind of a challenge because there's just too many things.
Yeah. I can tell you, I have much less than you do, no doubt, but I feel exactly the same way.
Especially a small thing like that, you know. I'm sure I put it into a protective case and then put it into something and something and something. So it's buried.
Yeah. Sort of a bit like a Russian doll, perhaps.
There you go.
In chapter 8, you talk about the Chumash Indians. Can you just give us a bit of history about them, because they're a very ancient tribe, and are they still around in today's California?
As far as I know, there are no full bloods living. The gentleman we encountered in the other story, Eyes Like Lakes, was probably the closest thing at the time to a genuine Chumash Indian. Their history goes back, I don't know, maybe 10,000 years in California. One surprising fact to me that I learned early on was before the arrival of the Spanish in 1542, it had been noted that they were living in relative bliss for 1,000 years, which to me is remarkable because they living on the coast, of course, they had all the shellfish, and in their canyons, they had beautiful creeks and water and herbs and small game and birds. And so living in bliss, you know, is a pretty bold statement, but I guess there were no predators of any kind or rival tribes. There were over 200, I believe, tribes in California at one time
God
with their
almighty.
different languages. And of course, you know, Indians are territorial and in terms of their hunting and fishing grounds. But I know a bit about the Chumash, but I think that's the most amazing fact that I've ever known.
Tell them how famous their baskets are.
Oh, Nancy wants me to tell you about their basketry. And you know, the Russians were in California making a play actually for California. We could be speaking Russian right now if history had gone a little different way. And the Russians were here in the 1700s. And when they encountered the Chumash, they realized how exquisite their baskets were. And they acquired quite a few. In fact, the Russians have either as many or more Chumash baskets than we do in our museums and collections in California.
Good God. Extraordinary.
Yeah, it is. And their baskets are exquisite and they're really valuable. They can go into the 6 figures.
Goodness. Yeah. In chapter 20 on Malka, you talk about your great uncle on your mother's side who was an eminent man in Palestine. And then you go on to say, like many families, the backstory isn't passed on for whatever reason. Now, I agree with you about that because I've got very much of a mixed heritage from quite a few nationalities. And it really, it was never put to me or assembled for me, as it were. And I had to sort of discover and make sense of it as I've grown up. Why do you think it is that, culturally speaking, there is this reluctance in families to explain to their children exactly where they come from, because so often in many families, the heritage is far richer than the individual can be led to believe or indeed understand. And that, having worked in libraries for a long time and been involved in family history, I find middle-aged and elderly people completely and utterly surprised when they make inquiries about their family backgrounds, where they have come from not broken, but from stable families, but yet nonetheless, their parents were very unforthcoming almost about the actual family heritage.
I understand your question deeply. You know, there are many reasons that you're aware of that they're obvious. That first, the record keeping wasn't very good. And for whatever guilt or shame or intermarriages or love children or whatever the case may be, you know, our lives get twisted and turned. And my parents' generation, known as the silent generation, the World War II folks. My parents went through our depression of the 20s, 30s. You know, survival was really the first thing on the plate. I think the new technology of the DNA and all that is the way to really trace it far back. In my own mind, I think you are as far back as you can trace. And if we all trace our heritage back, I think we all go to the same place, the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley. And they say we were all black in the beginning. And so it's all very curious and very interesting. And hopefully we all can find the answers that we need that satisfy us.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very instructive. In chapter 28, which is called Come to the Party, you mention a Hollywood psychic called Tamara Rand, who was later exposed as a charlatan. Do you believe that psychics are frauds?
Not necessarily. I think those gifts reside in certain people. There's so many unknown forces around us that some people are hypersensitive to. So I kind of look at it that way. People have special talents, and the ones that can do those things, I think, are sincere. And a lot of people, of course, take advantage of people's weakness, and or they get greedy. And in her terms of Tamara Rand being in, quote, a Hollywood psychic, I think that leads to a lot of problems inherent in that title. And, you know, she's not the first one to be found as a charlatan and run out of town.
Yeah.
You probably have those in Britain.
Oh, so we certainly do.
Yeah. We should have a convention of debunked psychics.
Yeah. Yeah, they could all be interrogated on TV, or I don't know.
Each other. They could out psychic each other.
In chapter 31 is called Portrait of a Poet, which is assumed to be Gregory Corso. Another poet at the time, and indeed a famous poet, was Allen Ginsberg. Was Allen a regular visitor to Point Doom?
I don't think I had ever seen him there in the 3.5 to 4 years I was there. I might have in passing, but he's an unusual looking character, and you wouldn't forget him if he was in your eye shot, but I don't remember seeing him there.
Yeah, I recall an interview with him towards the end of his life, and this was on BBC Radio when he visited London, and it was interesting for a number of reasons. But of course, the thing that came across was he was a Buddhist.
Okay.
And he talked about that, and indeed wrote quite a few poems about it as well. And I ought to say that my late wife was a Buddhist, although nominally she was brought up in the Catholic faith. In chapter 34, you talk about Point Doom. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Yes, that's it.
And I just wanted to ask what I think is a straightforward question. From the start of the building to its actual completion, when it was all finished and the insides had been sorted out and doubtless also the snagging, which is always a part of building work, had also been dealt with. How many years would that project have taken?
It was 3.5 to 4 years.
Yeah. There's an awful lot there, of course, an awful lot. My thought on that is from how you describe it and the bits of it that are described, that doesn't seem such a long time. Or am I here thinking in European terms where probably we're building things
Let me
takes
give you a
longer?
little insight into Bob Dylan's terms. The builder, Gilbert and Chang, Robert Gilbert and his partner Chang, for a long time, there was a crew of 80 people on the site. So, you know, when you got a lot of people, it goes quicker. And, you know, 3 years is quite a long time. 4 years. I've worked on many homes, and 2 years is pretty normal, you know. But so 80, and then I saw it in print in the 50s. And then the tile folks set up their tile factory on the grounds, and they probably had 15 people at one time working. So a lot of workers building that house on a daily basis.
Yeah. I've got a few more questions for you, Marty.
Sure.
I'm now going into chapter 26, House Guest, where there is a very fine photograph of a Dutch door with the bottom, as it were, fixed part, which can obviously be opened, and in two parts, and the top which opens. And it strikes me as though this is the sort of door that you find on horse boxes.
Yeah.
Can you give us just a little bit of history of the Dutch door?
Well, I'm not sure of the real history. Dutch would lead us to think that's the origin. But, you know, out here in the West, where there's a huge horse culture, you're right. The barn stalls for the horses, and, you know, the racetracks have that,
Yeah.
you know, where they stable their horses. You've seen many times, I'm sure, the horses with their heads sticking out
Yeah.
of the top of the open door. And they're used frequently in ranch style homes because they have such a nice ranchy flavor to them. So that's my take on it. And it allows for beautiful hardware, beautiful hand wrought hinges and latches and things. So it's a nice composition, the door, and it's a nice addition to a home.
Yeah, it looks beautiful, in fact. Coming up to chapter 36, again, obviously about Point Doom, you say you've got an early Californian legacy collection of over 3,000 objects. Obviously, they aren't all stored in one place.
No.
So they're in different places, are they? They're in different locations.
Well, they're at home and a big patio filled with garden requisites, but yeah, boxes and boxes and storage unit after storage unit filled with, just to give you some background, the homes that I do, the Spanish homes, they take a lot of objects, and just in lighting alone, one home can have 50, 75 light fixtures. So when I would go out on my buying and searching trips, if I saw something I would buy it and store it for the next project or the next project or the next project. So I accumulated, quite a bit of things that would be appropriate for these old Spanish villas and haciendas. But my personal core collection of 3,000 plus objects is a lifetime of searching. As you know, when you set out to be a collector and to put a specific collection together, it's a lifelong quest. And for me, I've accomplished my mission, and I'm looking for a home for it now, the proper repository for it here in Southern California.
Yeah.
So I had a purpose, I had a reason, and it's a beautiful collection. It's very elegant. It celebrates the artistry and artisanship of the craftspeople and the Spanish, what the Spanish brought us here in the Southwest, including the cowboy, our architecture, all of the trades, the wrought iron, the ceramics, all of it. So it's a celebration of all those things. I don't get political or religious. Of course, the padres and the missions weren't the kindest to the Indians, and that's all over the world. You've got colonizers coming in and thinking the locals are savages or what have you, and they want to Christianize them or whatever. I don't get into any of that. My thing is the celebration of all the cultural things that color old Spanish California in the Southwest.
Yeah. I'm sure you'll find a home for it, Marty. I'm sure you will. It must be quite fantastic.
It's
Just
rich.
and incredibly rich, incredibly rich. This comes through obviously in the book that you've written. It really does. My final question to you is just a straightforward, simple one. Towards the end of the book, you talk about the raven. Open-ended question. What is it about the raven that makes it specifically an object of fascination?
Well, the obvious is that they're dark and mystical and mercurial and all those kinds of things that you could say about them. But as you read, it took me quite a while to come to terms with my experience with Bob with the Raven. So for me, it's a personal thing to figure it out because it haunted me for a while. Like I said in the book, I went immediately to Edgar Allan Poe and the whole death thing because I'm not a literary type person, so I didn't understand it from different viewpoints. But when I did look it up in the Hopi tradition and all of the things I cite, it made perfect sense to me in that context for myself because I wanted some closure. And that did it for me. If you look the raven up, in most cultures, it's the same thing. He does it all, the raven. It's life, it's death, it's rebirth, it's all of the things embodied, and they have a huge brain, apparently. They're very, very smart. And so, when you're smart, obviously, you can do things that other creatures can't do. So if you have a chance, look up the raven. Maybe you have, but you'll see that they're really fascinating. And I've taken it about as far as I want to or need to, because I got as much as I needed to out of it.
The ravens in Palm Springs don't migrate anymore, and they're considered to be a nuisance because They go into people's garbage and eat all they want, and they live pretty well right here. So they're staying here. And so, but they have developed a bad reputation among people because they like desert tortoise eggs and little baby tortoises. And so that's why people consider them a nuisance. But they still are fascinating birds. To me, I just love them. And I've looked around so that Marty could read a story to some ravens, and we haven't found it yet, but I'm still looking. We need a raven that'll just sit there and listen to Marty's stories.
He's a cooperative raven.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed.
Good questions. I enjoyed them.
And Nancy, thank you.
Okay.